What does it say?
It says waiting for Michelle Koo, and it's just a box with 3 dots.
Yeah, but I don't know if it still hasn't gone out yet.
It says waiting for Michelle Koo, and it's just a box with 3 dots.
So I tell you what's happened is
It's on a different link. It's on a different URL. No, it's not.
stream finished.
Because we're on Zoom, you can actually click on the live on YouTube at the top. And if you click on that arrow, it says view stream on YouTube.
It says we're live. It's just somewhere where
It's on a different URL than the one that went on the agenda.
It's streaming live.
Yeah.
It says it's live, it's just.
this is the one that it's not streaming to.
Right.
I don't.
Can we get that link to Kathy June and have her blast that out?
Are you emailing it to Jen?
I don't know what. It is streaming to someplace, right?
It's still streaming it.
But is it still?
Yes. So go
Yeah,
back.
I'm watching it right now.
So you're still live streaming.
That's.
It says live on YouTube.
Yes.
Kathy, I just sent you the correct link. Can you?
Are you kidding?
out.
I was knocked off once already. I got knocked off. I had to go. I had to completely shut down and go back on. I missed all of Ron's thing. Live on YouTube.
I'm gonna post it on
Hey,
Facebook.
Rebecca, can you email that to me? Would you mind?
Yep,
Because I got an email
I'm gonna
from
send
a
it to all
parent.
of you.
I got an email from a parent.
What
asking
are
me
we
for it.
supposed to do with it? I had to completely shut down and go back on. I missed all of Ron's thing. Live on YouTube.
Which one am I watching?
Because you're on YouTube, but you're watching the live stream. So if you click out of YouTube,
I
you
got
should
an
get
email
back
from
to
a
it. You should
parent.
just be on
I got
Zoom.
an email from a parent.
What are we supposed to do with it?
And she sent it out through school messenger or something.
You don't have to have that up. I don't think you'd be doing it. You didn't have that up before.
Have had all.
Kathy, will you be able to send the link out via?
I have to go. I have to go
Yeah, I'm
on
gonna-
my own personal computer to do that.
You know what
And
I'm
I'm
also gonna do? I'm
Hold
gonna
on,
go
hold
to
on,
the,
hold on.
I'm gonna go to the incorrect link and then post it in the comments.
That's a great idea.
Turn the comments off.
Oh, you turn the comments off of it?
I have to go on my own personal computer to do that. You know what I'm also gonna do?
Add a public comment, can you do that?
I'm gonna go to the incorrect link and then
So
post it in the
over
comments.
here. Click that. Copy that.
Nobody can see it. So the comments are disabled.
Wait for it.
If someone sends me the link, I can send it out through school messenger.
Okay.
Want me to send it? I'll send it to her.
Yes, thank you, Ann.
Kathy, I just need to know, I might have a question about which list I'm sending it to. But
Tell
I'll see if I can
the
figure it out.
live stream link in the comments.
It's just,
Oh, she's got it, okay.
It's all parents, right?
it's all
Right.
parents, Ann, all parents.
Thank you, Ann.
Kathy, I just need to know, I might have a question about which list I'm sending.
All right, we can still, I mean, it is still publicly available by phone, so it's still, I mean, the meeting is,
Right,
the stream is an additional thing. And yes, we'll have to figure that out so that that doesn't happen again.
Okay, everybody can still be a part of the meeting.
People can phone in. Yeah.
So they also have it now. And the whole stream so people see it pop up.
Thank you everybody for hanging in through that.
Okay, everybody can still be a part of the meeting.
Yeah, I couldn't get on Facebook to post it.
All right.
Just side.
I think the
on
new
mic.
town B is tweeting out something too about the change in the URL for the streaming meeting. So
Okay.
if you can let them know, they can tweet it out too, which might be helpful.
Can't hear what would be
The
Oh, I think they just sent out the new URL for the streaming video. The new town B just tweeted it out.
Oh, okay.
If that's
Thank you.
helpful at all.
Thank you.
Yep, they do.
All right. Technology. All right, so we will continue and I think we were leaving off with the superintendent's report, and I believe Dan Delia, you had a question or a comment?
Dr. Rodrigue, can you just briefly revisit what's going to need to occur for us to go back full time after this initial hybrid? Is there a matrix, or can you?
Yeah, no, because this was about easing back in, as most of the districts decided that was a much more reasonable approach. As long as the numbers sustain as we are at 0% here in Newtown, then those dates that I gave, the October 5th and the November 2nd, are real dates, and we will be going back first with the elementary and then with the secondary. So unless something changes, and the metrics would then have to be, and I sent you that metric, which is also posted. And that's why Danbury, with the number of cases, they had to go into a full closure. Given the rise in their cases and the upward trends, we're not here in Newtown. So if everything sustains, then we will be going back full.
Thank you very much for clarifying that for me.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the superintendent's report? Yes, Mr. Delia.
I just have one more. Dr. Rodrigue, are the teachers going to be receiving training on COVID? Is there anything COVID related for the teachers as they get ready to teach?
It's going to be very much focused on COVID. First days, not just on the cleaning and the sanitation and the mitigation strategies, but also the next level, which is the academic piece and how they're going to work with students in their class, the cohorts, and those on remote learning. So all of the 6 days that we have are all going to be somewhat related to the hybrid model that we're in, as well as how to keep themselves and their students safe based on all of the implementation of the protocols and mitigation strategies.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, sensing none, we will move on to our committee reports then. So I think we had a policy, we had 2 meetings, right? So we'll start with policy and then we'll do CIP facilities after that.
Sure, we had a policy meeting with an abbreviated agenda. We mostly just talked about the policies that are back for a second read. Sorry, it's hard with the echo. I just hear myself everywhere. The policies that are back for a second read tonight, that's the policy on pandemic, epidemic emergencies, and also distance education. We also briefly discussed the racial and ethnic equality policy. There were some feedback from the community and staff members and board members on that one as well. We wanted to give that more time, so we moved that off of this agenda to a future agenda, and the policy committee is going to focus on that at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the echo thing makes it hard, doesn't it? All right. Any questions on policy committee work? All right, so how about we'll do the CIP Facilities Finance Committee.
Yeah,
Mr. Delia?
excuse me. The CIP Facilities Finance Committee had a abbreviated agenda as well. We spoke about two things. We spoke about anticipated expenses related to COVID, which is a significant number, and I think I'll speak to that when we get to the end of our agenda when we talk about the non-lapsing fund. And then we also spoke about the regulation around the non-lapsing fund. And we had a great discussion, and that's that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the CIP committee meeting? All right, were there other meetings or liaison activities? Yeah, Mr. Delia?
Yeah, I had a meeting with Bob Gerbert and Chris Williams, who's the architect and the manager of the Hawley project. Ilona Prosol, she is an air quality engineer. Alan Adriani, who is the chair of the Hawley project committee, I believe, and also on building and site. And then John Luby, who is a mechanical engineer. And we spoke for quite a while about getting this project off the ground and what needs to happen. We had discussions around inspections for asbestos, which I think are happening this week. And then the indoor air quality study was a big topic of discussion because the school is not going to be fully populated. And we had a lot of conversation around if the school is populated or not and how that affects air quality. And what we ended up doing was deciding to do two different tests. One test the second week in October, which if everything stays the same, the school will be populated, but the windows might be open, so that might skew the numbers a little bit. And then they're going to do a second test a month later in November. And then we just discussed about scheduling. And the last note that I wrote in my notes was that we are extremely lucky to have Bob Gerbert on our team, because he is an integral part of this process and he knows what he's talking about. It's very impressive when I'm asking what an abbreviation is and what this means and what that means. And Bob is really, he knows it. And I was extremely impressed with him. So that's kind of what happened. It was kind of a let's get going meeting, and that's that.
Right, that's good to hear that that the air quality will be able to be done in the fall. Ms. Zukowski?
Yeah, at our last board meeting, we mentioned that we weren't getting official communications. I am still not getting official communications. I did not know that this meeting was being held, and I'm wondering if there would be a way to fix that for future meetings.
I don't know if this was a meeting for the committee, Ms. Zukowski. I think this was a meeting that I was invited as the chair of the CIP, but I will definitely make sure, and I did mention that as well to Alan. I said we got to make sure that everybody's getting communications, but I will, if I ever get something, I will make sure that you're in the loop.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and I apologize, I did not follow up with Bob Mitchell on that, and I will.
This meeting, just to make sure this meeting was not a committee meeting. This was a scheduling meeting with the architect who's managing the project, and I was just kind of witnessing them talking through the next 10 months worth of work. Okay, I was kind of more or less trying to be the eyes and the ears for the board, so I could give you this update of what's going on.
Yeah, so I think that's the purpose of having the two board members assigned, is to be a part of those scheduling meeting. I mean, that is part of the purpose of having the board members there. And I'm glad that you were included in that, but that really should be something that both board members who've been assigned to that liaison activity be there for those meetings.
But this
So,
was not a committee meeting. This was not the Hawley committee. So I just wanted to make sure that I made that clear. This was not a Hawley committee meeting. But I
yeah,
will definitely make sure that Deb Zukowski is included if
okay.
I am included and she is not.
Thank you. Yeah, and by no means that's not your, that was not your responsibility, but I'm glad to know that you will be looking out for that. That should be the responsibility of public building and site to make sure that you are included in those. So
Yeah, we're totally good. And Deb, if you ever get invited and I don't know, I would hope that, just fill me in too. But I understand completely. Thank you.
okay, thank you. All right, any other liaison activities that need to be brought to the attention of the board? All right, I'm going to move on then to our year-end financial report. Oh, just before we move on, I will mention that our next meeting, I believe we will start having our student representatives join us for our next meeting as well. So that'll be another report to add to our next agenda. All right, so maybe we could get a motion on the year-end financial report.
Move that the Board of Education approve the June 30, 2020 year-end financial report.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion. Mr. Binkowski.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I am always pleased to give an annual financial report because it represents the culmination of a fiscal year, and this was quite a fiscal year indeed. The past month of June, we had spent $11.8 million, 9.3 on salaries, and the various numbers that are listed in the report on all the other objects. The reason June was a bit higher, if you noticed, compared to last year, was that with our new accounting system, we have a period 13, which captures all of the July and August expenses in the period 13. So it lists it as an expenditure, which is the same as having it as an encumbrance, but it just moves it forward 2 months earlier. So what this is shown is that there's only $237,000 in encumbrances, which represent commitments for tuition, supplies, products, utilities, and items that have not been invoiced as of the date of this report. These encumbrances typically take several months to clear out, and if there's any shortages or overages, they'll be captured at the end of next year. We ended the fiscal year with a positive balance of $1,362,451. This is 1.7% of our total expenditures that were approved for the 1920 year. This amount is eligible to be deposited into the non-lapsing account. On the revenue side, we were pretty much in line with what we were expecting. We were just about $5,900 less than what was budgeted, and that was primarily due to less tuition receipts because we shut the school year down early. We didn't charge folks for the March, April, and May and June semesters. There are no transfers that are recommended on this report. I struggled with that a bit because we traditionally do transfers to bring all line items into a plus or minus $5,000 amount. The problem with this is that because there were so many accounts that were underspent, it wouldn't be representative of what the final balances were, in my opinion. I also had a brief conversation with our auditors about this as well to make sure that they were in agreement with it, and they felt that because it was such an unusual year, it didn't make sense to really do that because sure, we could cover the negative numbers, but then you're going to have positive numbers all over the place. So it doesn't give you the same information that it would if you just look at it and see where the positive numbers are. I've listed on the in the narrative here all of the negative areas. Some of them are COVID related and some are not COVID related, but you could look at that at your leisure. The special education excess cost revenue and all of the other revenues are booked in this report. They haven't changed from the month of May when that was last reported on. The month of May, we had indicated that there was going to be about an $800,000 positive balance. The reason this balance has gone up to this extent is that we reversed the $375,000 expense for the Verkada camera. We backed that out, so that became money that was available and added to the bottom line. And we also applied for $109,000 worth of distance learning materials to the CARES Act because we were eligible for that money, and those expenses were incurred, so we were able to reduce the budget by that amount as well. So we ended the year probably, this is the best result I've ever had as a business manager. I can't really take credit for it, but it is a huge number, and I'm sure we could put it to good use considering the additional expenses that are coming up related to COVID and the uncertainties in this current fiscal year. So if you have any specific questions about the report, I'll do my best to answer them.
Okay, are there any questions? Yes, Ms. Zukowski.
Try and be polite. I have two. The first is, year after year, we always have an overage for, special education across all of the parts that account for special education funding. I know that we used the $100,000 that was in the contingency line, but where did we actually finally end up with that functional area?
Well, the biggest area of special ed is on page 4 of the financial report. You'll see the tuition out of district, and that's where the transfer of $100,000 has gone into that line. You'll see that the year-end balance was only minus $99,041, and this was somewhat of a not a surprise, but it was a welcome result because of all the confusion at the end of the year with all of the other schools and services that they were providing or they were not providing. They discounted a lot of their bills. Either bills didn't come in, or the other factor that affected this was that youngsters had dropped out of the program, so they didn't bill for youngsters that had dropped out, because the previous report was indicating that this was going to be about $300,000 in the red. So it really dropped down by $200,000 just in the month of June when we got all of these final bills. The report that you're referring to is a different report which lists the salaries, the paraprofessionals, and all the other aspects that are in the cost center of the special ed fund. That is not included in this report, but it includes parts of this report. So I think when we look at those, when we get those numbers together, when we put that report together, we're going to see a more favorable outcome this year than we have in the past several years. But we will be working on that.
Okay. Okay, and the second one is, I know that we did some work on our facilities to take advantage of buildings being vacant. And I see that you've got a list of things that were done on the end of the packet here. But I just wanted to make sure because I can't make the numbers line up. I think in the summary, it said there was like $47,000. So can you help us understand what projects we may have pushed forward to take care of while it was easier to get those projects done?
Well, this summary list that's included here are the building and site maintenance projects. And these are represented on page 3 of the financial report under purchase property services. You'll see the last line there says building and site improvements. So it's a negative $35,491. And that ties into this particular listing that you have here. The other piece that I was talking about was the building site and emergency repairs, which is about 3 lines up from there where you see a negative $43,377. And these are a lot of this are the emergency repairs that for every preceding financial report, I have listed what the emergency repairs were that occurred in that particular year, in that particular month. I could just tell you some of them. I don't have them all memorized, but for example, the head of metal well pump went down. That was about a $6,800 repair. We had the boilers cracked, the sections that cracked at the head of metal boiler, and that was probably around $12,000 when we were all done. This particular school had a leak in the oil tank and the evacuation tubes out there. That was a very expensive job. That was probably about $33,000. So when you look at those big ticket emergency repair items, I think those are what are primarily responsible for pushing this number into this negative area. Other things that we've done to the school may not have been big dollar amounts. They may have been things that were done with our maintenance crew, where they just were able to catch up on the backlog of work orders that they have had that they can't do when kids are in school. I mean, a lot of the plumbing repairs have been done, a lot of additional electrical work has been done, and HVAC stuff that's within the capability of our maintenance crew. Those are things that we got done as well. So it's really a number of different things that all come together in these 2 line items. I mean, this one's detailed, but the other one's not, but we do have the monthly detail of what the emergency repairs have been.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Delia, did you have a question on the previous question that you wanted to follow up on and I missed seeing your hand?
Yeah, Ron, I was just going to ask, you didn't miss me. I was a little late to the game, but Ron, I was just wondering the impact of transportation savings on the special ed expenditures. And I was wondering if you could speak to that for a second, because I see that I think it was like I'm scrolling back and forth, but I think it was several $100,000 savings in transportation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and most of the transportation savings was related to our day-to-day transportation, not the special ed. We had struck an agreement with Education Ed Advanced that does our special ed transportation, that we would pay them the full rate for last year so that they could pay their drivers, and they're giving us credit for that this year. So the advantage of doing that last year was that those costs became eligible for the excess cost grant. That's why we didn't see a drop off in the amount of money we received on the excess cost grant. It's the same essentially as it was in the past couple of months.
Thank you.
It was really the, to and from all of our schools that we saved the money on.
Thank you.
Okay, and then Ms. Herman Stites, did you have a question?
Yes, it's a new topic. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think, so. Was there any follow-up on the special education piece? No. Okay, so go ahead.
My question is actually about the additional $380,000 that the state is sending to Newtown. And I know that we requested around 1.5 million, and some of that was for academic support personnel. I'm just wondering if we know specifically we were going to spend that $380,000 on.
I'm sorry, I had a little trouble with that because I hear you here, I hear you there. It's delayed, so I missed.
The additional state funding that was just announced, the 380,000.
So I can answer that. So this was just announced. So Ron and I are going to be sitting because when we look at what we asked for, which was the 1.5, that was prior to that money being announced. So that again will offset and help us out because there will still be things in the future. So again, when we look at what we have and what will offset, for example, we did not include in the 1.5 the FEMA money as well, like the 75%. We still don't know what part of that will be. So there will be, expenditures and then what we have to offset that as well. And that money is going to help a lot.
Okay, Ms. Zukowski?
Following up on that. So sorry. Following up on that, I know when we had a storm, the FEMA money went to the town general fund. So if we get reimbursed with the FEMA money, will that be going to the town general fund? And then the next question is, what about the CARES Act and anything else that, may be specific, the state funds? Would they be going directly to the town?
So
or the district?
So the FEMA reimbursement goes to the general fund, just as it had done in the past. The CARES fund, the reimbursements, the ESSER money will come to the district. And I believe the additional funding that Rebecca, you were referring to, will also come directly to the district as well.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, I have one, and this is in all the years that I've been listening to the year-end reports, I haven't really paid attention to that, the encumbrances that haven't been invoiced yet. And it's always been a pretty small amount at the end of the year. So I just, I was wondering if you could help me understand how that works. So this year we're expecting 273,000. That's what currently, 273,000 in encumbrances that have not been invoiced yet. Is that right?
Well, the total is 236,000. If you look at that encumbrance column on the financial.
Oh, did I write down?
I rounded it to 237.
Okay.
But what they are is if in each of the categories, if we look at professional services first, for example, that's on page 3, you'll see that we had under the first line, professional service, we have $5,279 that's outstanding. This may be for medical evaluations for students. Sometimes those get written late in the year. They may be working on them in May and June, and they don't typically invoice something like that until the report is completed and sent to the district. So sometimes those reports don't even get to us until July or August. So they're committed expenses for the year, but they don't get paid until the report is completed. The other professional education services could be professional development, books, tapes, conferences that perhaps teachers may have gone on that haven't been invoiced because they may have occurred late in the year. Going down to the next category where you see purchase property services, building and grounds, $5,630. That's a single repair for one of the schools. I don't quite remember what it is, but the next big one here is the equipment repairs. We send a lot of equipment out, musical instruments, for example, to be reconditioned and retuned. And again, we don't pay for those. until they come back. Same thing with the athletic uniforms. Those all go out usually during the summer and come back at the end of the summer. So that's probably what's in there. The building and site, we already looked at that summary. Contracted services, the majority of this has to do with technology, equipment, or services that haven't been completed that will need to be sent our way when the invoices are done. Printing services, that could be, that is like applications for free and reduced lunches that we pay for, and various print jobs that were at the schools. The tuition, we have probably one outstanding tuition for $5,500, and it goes down along the same ways. In instructional supplies, it could be some specialized materials or papers, or it could be a variety of things that have not been paid. So 236,000 for all non-salary is a pretty small amount when you consider the size of our total budget.
So then does that come from that last year's budget?
It does. It's encumbered. So it's actually, when we report to the state what our expenditures are, we include encumbrances as expenditures.
Okay.
And if there's any change in those encumbrances during the year, we're required to make an adjustment in the following year. So it's always counted as an expense, and it's included in the town audit also as an expense in some of their schedules.
So that's where I got confused. So it says that it will be returned to the town at the end of the 2021 year. That's only if we budgeted for encumbrances that don't actually come to fruition. Is that
right?
What that means?
Exactly. So the 236,000, if we don't get invoiced or we cancel whatever's outstanding and we save $30,000, then that would roll to the town's general fund.
And so for this, so right now we're rolling, what was it, 30,000 will go to the town's general fund from
That's from last
year.
Yeah.
Okay,
Those are encumbrances that were over encumbered for last year.
got it.
Because some things are estimated. For example, electricity may be estimated, and for some reason the utility company is delayed in presenting the bill. When they finally present the bill, it may be $2,000 less than what we estimated. So that extra $2,000 would go to the town's general fund.
Okay.
And that all those are detailed on this page 3 of the financial. You could see the unliquidated encumbrances from all the years there. So there's nothing really significant there. The biggest one was 74,000, which happened in June of 2011. So it's a pretty consistent amount, I think.
Okay. So that 237,000 that is current could, that may be 10,000 by the time next
right.
year rolls around. Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments on the year-end financial report before we vote on that? All right. All those in favor? Aye. And then
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Ledline and Mr. Voros on the line voting in favor, so that's unanimous. All right, so that brings us to our old business and the action on policies. So we have.
Nope.
Oh, no, not yet. We have another motion for financial
I'm
report.
sorry. Yeah, thank you.
I
All right,
move.
I'll entertain that motion then.
I move that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the month ending July 31, 2020.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes a motion, Mr. Kusan seconds it, and this is the brand new year report. Mr. Binkowski, do you want to go over that
Okay. Yeah.
first month?
Well, this is another exciting moment because it's a new fiscal year and we have tons of money available. So what this does, though, is at least it lays out the approved budget, the budget that you amended on July 16th, June 16th and July 7th. So everything's in alignment with those adjustments that went before the board. We spent $4.7 million for operations. The excess cost grant is listed here based on what we budgeted for excess cost. And that's in that schedule that follows the financial report. We also have in here the unaudited year-end expenses for 2019-20. And I just emphasize that it's unaudited because when the auditors are done, they can make some changes here or there. When it does get audited, usually the audit report comes to us in December. By January, those will be final figures, and probably the last 10 years, the final figures have been the same as the unaudited figures that I've presented in these reports. So right now, we're in pretty good shape. You got to remember when you're looking at the expended numbers that we shut the school year down on March 12th. So that's why you'll see a number of significant variances there comparing the expended to the approved budget. But there's nothing that significant to report on. Actually, the special ed youngsters that we have now are status quo with where they were last year. We had, I believe, 35 youngsters budgeted, and we currently have 34 tuition kids. We got 15 mediated agreements, and we had budgeted for 20 mediated agreements. So this is again a good result, because during the summer is when we usually experience significant move-ins that affect our special education tuition out costs. So let's hope that stays that way for the rest of the year.
Okay. Are there any questions on this report? Sensing none. It's a short, it's a month long to worry about. All right, so all those in favor? Aye.
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 All right, that's unanimous. Now we can move on to old business. And that brings us to our policy 6114.8. We'll entertain a motion on that.
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 6114.8, pandemic/epidemic emergencies.
Second.
Okay, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds it, and I will turn it over to Ms. Harriman Stites to lead us through this discussion.
Great, thank you. We did receive some feedback from a board member on this policy. The changes that were made since the first read are actually in purple. I, of course, printed in black and white, so I'm looking at the screen again, just so that you can see the changes that were made since your initial viewing of this. And that's just to that first section. We realized with the help of that feedback that last sentence in the first paragraph was a little wonky, and so we reworked it to make it far simpler. So thank you for that suggestion. There were a number of other questions. We did talk at length in our meeting about all of those. I'm not sure if the chair would like me to go through every question or just present this as recommended by the policy committee. The policy meeting is recorded and up where all the questions were answered. I just don't know if you wanted us to reiterate the work of the policy committee in the full board meeting.
Yeah, I don't think you need to go through all the questions and answers, but if there's anybody who still has questions that were not addressed that you feel are still important to address, then now would be the time to talk about it. So yes, Ms. Zukowski. And then
I'm just going to ask one of the three. In this, it's about emergencies, and there's two ways to interpret paragraphs 3, 4, and 5 on page 8. 3 says, shall develop a component to the health curriculum, make sure that we have PPE and procedures for the transportation of students in the event of evacuation. The question is whether these paragraphs hold only if we find ourselves in a epidemic emergency, or if we will always have in our health curriculum a component to talk about pandemics in health classes and et cetera for the other two. So I just was curious how to interpret those three questions. I mean, those three paragraphs.
So it is my understanding, based on the conversation that we had in the policy committee, that we do have a section of our health curriculum about the prevention of communicable diseases. So that's standard procedure. We also discussed those other two areas, and the superintendent, I don't know, Dr. Rodriguez, if you want to address our supply of PPE and other cleaning products and our transportation plans. But as far as I recall from our meeting, those are things that we would have on hand no matter what the emergency is.
Yes, that's what we talked about. I'm trying to recollect what we talked about then, but yes, so we felt that these were, even though they stood alone in the policy, that we would have these supplies on hand.
And when we discuss transportation, we've always had an emergency plan in place for transportation. It's actually been practiced even before we had a pandemic to practice it for. So that's handled outside of this policy even.
Yes, you're talking about the evacuation protocols. Yes, we've had those all along.
Okay. Were there any other questions or comments on this policy? All right, so I'm assuming we're ready to vote on that. So all those in favor? Aye. And then those on the phone?
Aye.
This is Ms. Lideline votes in favor, and Mr. Voros
Aye.
is in
Aye.
favor.
Aye.
That's unanimous. All right, and that brings us to our next policy, if we can get a motion on that one.
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 6172.61, distance learning plan due to health and safety school closure.
Second.
Okay, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion, and then Ms. Herman states, I'll let you.
Sure. Obviously, this is another timely policy, so I do appreciate the board members' feedback on this policy as well. And similar to the last one, you can see the changes that we made in the recent policy committee since your first read in purple on your version that you received in the board packet. So we did try to make this policy encompass both a health and a safety closure. So a board member pointed out the location on that first page where we had failed to include safety. So thank you for catching that. We also made an adjustment to the school nutrition benefits, making it clear that school lunches would be available when the buildings were closed and school was still in session. So when a day was being counted as a school day, school lunch would be available. And that was a good addition, we thought, to make this policy a little bit more clear. As the instruction piece is constantly changing and being adapted, we made some adjustments to the section on instruction and really just added the word at minimum and changed the grade level to pre-K to 4, because we know that this is what we can deliver at minimum, though we are building a more robust system right now. But in lieu of holding this policy, we wanted to have the basic structure in place. And you'll see that we moved it to a 512 grade level for the second section. I think there was just a couple other small edits. I think the biggest one was to section 12 around grading, and then we added a section 13 on compliance. So on grading, we added the words, if required, the Board of Education shall approve revisions to the grading and reporting systems. We felt like that made that section a little bit more clear. And then the compliance section was also a very good suggestion because obviously we can't consider distance learning days as full school days unless the state approves that plan. So we thought it was a good addition to clarify the policy in that way.
Okay. All right, where is the echo coming from for you when you speak? Can you
Echo
tell?
is coming from Lori's computer.
Oh, okay.
And I did send her a sign that said, turn your volume down.
Oh, okay. All right.
And
It was much worse before.
Okay. I don't notice. I only notice it when you're speaking, not
That's
when
because I'm right next to her.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So are there any questions or comments on Ms. Zukowski?
Yeah, when this was expanded, and I thought rightly so, for other safety based school closures, one of the things that I am concerned about is in special education, in what used to be paragraph or item C, it says appropriately certified professional staff members will continue to implement these programs through distance learning opportunities. So when it was specifically focused on health, it assumed that people were infectious and you needed to do what you could to break the pandemic. I'm not breathing well, so but when you talk about safety, then it's a question of like if a school gets closed down because it was flooded, or and you need to clean it up, and so you need to have everybody go home. But we've got students who struggle with distance learning, in particular the special education students. And so I was would look and say, well, there could be, in cases of a particular school shutting down, accommodations made where programs could actually still happen in person because you don't have the risk of infection. So what I'm concerned about is if language like what I just read would mean that, we would be breaking policy if we were to actually provide those programs for that special education population to ensure that they get the, the services that they need. So that is concerning to me. And I'm just curious if that would be the case, that particular, for example, program, would it mean that regardless that these services would be by distance learning?
It's section 9, the special education section.
We were trying to get the volume down, so I didn't hear.
So
I'm sorry.
I don't believe it would be breaking the policy. And I think it's important to remember that all of this, including the distance education component, all of this is if we are distance learning based and count, like having a school day that is not in a school building and that is counted as a school day. So if there's a flood, for instance, there was a flood in the Hedda Meadow School building a couple of years ago, and we had to close that school for a day, that was not a learning day for those students. So I don't believe that in that instance we would, if we were to offer students a in-person education opportunity in a safe environment, I do not believe we would be breaking policy. And I don't know if anyone else has a.
No, I agree. I think, and the situation you brought up is a good one. That's a good analogy. So I don't think that is going to contradict what's in the policy. If that was truly your question, Mrs. Zukowski.
But there could be policies that are more than one school day, like Brookfield had asbestos in their school buildings, and that went to months, in which case these days are being counted as school days. And the language says these services shall continue with appropriate distance learning opportunities. I just, I we could suspend the policy, I suppose, to be effectively complying with our policies. But I find it very confusing.
Could we just say
Mr.
when
Cruzan, did you
possible?
have some? Oh, Ms. Uberti, were
Yeah.
you?
Could we just add when feasible?
We discussed another element in the meeting as well, about, again, it actually comes down to feasibility, but when we're talking about moving just the special ed students to another, now I'm getting the echo. When we're talking about moving the special ed students, just them to another building, that is, it takes a lot of organization, a lot of reconfiguring to make them fit into another building, and that causes an issue if we're just moving that group. If we're talking about something like an asbestos abatement, like you were mentioning, that would go on for multiple months, we'd be talking about moving that entire building into another building, and that would be a different set of circumstances. We'd essentially be setting up another building, I imagine, kind of like we did with Sandy Hook and Chalk Hill. So it wouldn't be against this policy because that whole building would be in another building.
We wouldn't essentially be closing the school building. School would still be in, that school would still be in session in another space.
Okay, is everybody okay? Do we need to add the wording that Ms. Uberti suggested? No, with that. Okay. All right, so unless somebody wants to make a motion on changing anything, I think, unless there are more questions, are there questions on this policy? No, all right, so I think we're ready to vote then. All those in favor of the policy? Aye.
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 And I hear Mr. Voros and Ms. Weidline saying aye, so that's unanimous. And that brings us to our new business. And the action on our request for unexpended funds. So I will entertain a motion on that.
All right, buckle up. This is a big one. I move that the Board of Education request of the Board of Finance that the unexpended funds from the 2019-20 fiscal year budget appropriation in the amount of $1,362,451 be deposited into the non-lapsing account established in accordance with Connecticut General Statute Section 10-248A for educational purposes. Further to this action is that the source of these funds are detailed on the year-end financial report as previously approved by this Board of Education, and further that the anticipated use of said funds will be to provide required funds to the extent necessary to cover unbudgeted expenses related to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Second.
Okay, Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruzan seconds the motion.
I'd like to speak to my motion.
I'm
If that's
sorry,
okay.
Mr. D'Elia, did you?
May I speak to my motion?
Yes, please.
And I'm sure that Lori or Ron will chime in on this, but I just want to say that the CIP discussed the anticipated or a kind of an estimate of expenses related to COVID-19, and it's somewhere around $1.5 million right now. And I think Ms. Zukowski will agree with me that we think that number is actually, I personally, and I'm not going to put words in Ms. Zukowski's mouth, but we think that number's short. We think it's going to be higher than that. And I just want to state that for the record, that I think, based on what I've heard and learned, that our expenses will exceed $1.5 million related to COVID-19 expenses for the upcoming year. Deborah, do you want to just chime in on that for me before I?
Zukowski, did you want to add to that?
as long as the school remains open for the entire year, I totally agree that, because this is going to be going into not only this coming semester, it's going to be trickling across through probably for the entire school year. So I'm with you. Now, if the school ends up going distance learning, that's a whole different
Yeah,
topic.
that's a great point. Thank you for making that point. As long as things stay as planned, which we're very hopeful that they will, I firmly believe that our expenses will exceed $1.5 million. Okay.
Okay. I don't know, Mr. Binkowski, did you want to add anything to what our CIP committee has said about this?
Well, I think the comments that were expressed concerning this are pretty much spot on. We've been keeping track of the expenses that we're incurring on a day-to-day basis. And also, we're anticipating certain expenses, and the list keeps changing. There are expenses that keep getting added to it. So the likelihood that it could be higher than this is fairly certain. It is a big number. We're looking at approximately $1.5 million. It's broken down into three categories. Personnel costs are about $650,000. Facilities expenses are about $426,000, and other items amount to about $436,000. So those three numbers add up to $1,514,000. Some of these items are in the process of being purchased and delivered, and some we're pretty sure that we're going to be spending that money in the future. There are potential offsets to this. I mentioned the CARES Act before. We've already applied for our share of what we're eligible for with the CARES Act and applied distance learning expenses that were in Mr. Birdie's budget last year to that for reimbursement. Those items are not on this list at all. And then there are FEMA funds that will be processed through the town, and typically FEMA will pay 75% of what they deem as eligible. All the items on this list are not eligible according to the FEMA definition. It looks like the FEMA reimbursement will be limited to PPE and cleaning type of equipment and supplies. It won't cover desk shields and tents and tables and other types of furniture that we need to make accommodations in the classroom, and it won't cover certain personnel costs. There is also another, the governor has indicated that there will be a coronavirus relief fund, which we will be eligible for as well. I believe that money will be coming to the school district. We don't have any more details on it other than that it's going to be coming, and they're going to be sending more information probably in the next couple of weeks. So, the high end is going to be $1.5 million plus, but hopefully we'll be able to offset a number of those expenses with some of these federal assistance programs that are available.
Okay. All right, does anybody have any questions or comments? I'll just comment and say that I think that there is a huge potential for variability in this, as you've already stated, but I think it could be anywhere from schools are permanently distant learning for the year, and that would be one direction that would send the budget one way, but then in the other direction, it could be that these fast tests are available and that they'll be made available to all the schools, and we'll have to pay for the fast testing. I don't know. I mean, I can see things coming up in the next year. There have been so many surprises in the last 3 months, I can't imagine that we're not going to see more surprises in this year. So I can imagine it increasing beyond what we anticipate as well. So, are there any other questions? I have one other question. I know, you know, we've been endeavoring to put away the $100,000 for the special education contingency every year, and I know we've used it this year, so that's not. So we will continue with the, I don't know, what is it, 63,000 currently in the non-lapsing fund for special education, and then make the case again this coming year in the budget that we need to increase that amount, I suppose. Is that Ms. Zukowski?
One thing we could think about, and I know that I get the feeling that the Board of Finance is really not comfortable with such a large amount of money. But one thing we could think about is to basically say, if for some reason we don't use that money for COVID, that we have a certain amount of it that gets designated specifically for special education. And that actually may help them feel a little bit more comfortable knowing that it's really specifically for COVID or specifically for this other well-known and very difficult problem of properly funding our special education.
Yeah, I like that. Mr. Cruson and then Ms. Herman Stites.
Perhaps make that number up to 100,000, since that's what our contingency would have been if we hadn't had to spend it. If we're going that route, it's just saying, if we don't spend X amount, we designate it for special education.
Follow up if.
Yeah, Ms. Zukowski.
I would actually say what we would try and go for would be the average of the last 3 years worth of overages. The $100,000 is a good place to start. And we know that we've had to have that in our contingency line, but it never, I mean, we've had $400,000 overages for the last 8 years on average. And it would be nice to finally get out ahead of the game.
Ms. Herman Stites.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to suggest something similar, and I also agree with you about, you know, just simply keeping it to the $100,000, not really helping us to adequately fund special education at the rate that we know we'll need to fund it. I also think it was an excellent point about the fact that if we're in our school buildings, you know, it may cost this much. But if we're distance learning, again, that number may be very different. Additionally, you know, the 1.5 something million is just what we know. So, I mean, I like having options, and I hope the Board of Finance will understand where we are and see that as a good faith effort to plan ahead.
Yeah. Ms. or Dr. Rodriguez, did you have something to add?
I was just going to agree with what everyone said, especially what Ron expressed in terms of we don't know what this number really is. I mean, I submitted 1.5 million to the state. That's the information we had at the time. Yes, absolutely. I agree with Mr. D'Elia. This could go far beyond that, but we really don't know that because we have to consider not only the money that is coming in to support or offset, but also whether we're going to be on hybrid or distance learning for, you know, months again, or whatever that looks like, will really, you know, play a role in what money is we're able to use.
Mr. D'Elia?
Need, I should say.
Thank you. And that's why I kind of started this conversation, because I wanted it to be, I just, you know, these are, we talked about it in CIP. I mean, just this, I mean, I remember our conversation about hand sanitizer. We're going to spend over $100,000, I believe, or I could be wrong, but I think somewhere around $100,000 on hand sanitizer. And who knows how many pumps the kids are going to take, you know? I mean, it could. So I just think we should prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation related to this motion.
Yeah. Is there anybody else who'd like to comment on this before we vote? All right, I'm sensing no more conversation, so all those in favor? Aye. And on the phone, we have
Aye.
Ms. Lideline and
Aye.
Mr. Voros, both in favor,
Aye.
so that's unanimous. Thank you. All right, that brings us to the Board of Ed School Community Recognition Letter. So I will entertain a motion that I'm sorry, I'm looking around the room for Dan Delia and he's not here. Dan, would you like to, oh, you're on mute.
There wasn't a motion written on our sheet, so I didn't know if we were making a motion for this or not.
If we're signing on to it as if we all want to put our name on this as a board, if we want to endorse this as a board, I would say it holds more weight if we all vote on it.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we endorse the board's community communication letter.
Okay, and
Second.
we have a second. So Mr. Delia makes a motion to approve the school community letter and Mr. Kusan seconds it. Mr. Delia, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you for letting me speak to this. This was just something that I thought was a wonderful way for us to reach out to all the people that are involved in our schools and let them know that we support them, we thank them, we're behind them during what's going to be a challenging time. And I just think that people need to hear that and know that this is how we feel. And I'll leave it at that.
All right.
Okay.
I appreciate the time you put into putting this together. I'm fully in support of sending this out, and I appreciate the time you spent on it.
And there is a typo on the first line that I caught, and I apologize for that. So
Yeah, we can fix that. That's pretty easy. Ms. Harriman Stites?
No, I was just going to say I thought it was a beautiful letter, and I really appreciate you bringing this forward. I think it's important, and I think it really it's a critical sentiment for us to send out at this time. So I'm in full support of it, and thank you for drafting it on our behalf.
Anyone else want to add to that? All right, so before we vote on that, I do want to sort of clarify how this is going to go out. So we could send it out through just the email system, which I think probably is the easiest way of doing it, and just sign. I think I'm trying to remember how you signed we'll make the typo correction in the first line. And then do you want to leave it, I think it's signed as the Newtown Board of Education, and not put our individual names on it, just leave it at Newtown Board of Education.
Wanted it.
Ms. Zukowski?
If you wanted it more so that it would seem a little bit more, instead of monolithic, more person to person, you could say from each member or all members of the Newtown Board of Education.
All right, how do folks feel about that? Is it? Mr. Delia, you're muted. Are you speaking?
Deborah, how would we do that? What did you say? With sincere thanks from each member of the Board of Education instead of from the Newtown Board of Education? Yeah.
we could do that. I mean, by voting on this, it is the Board of Education that is saying this as one voice.
What about from each of us on the Newtown Board of Education?
From each of us. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. I'm sensing that that's okay, unless somebody objects. And I think that, so go out by email, right? Kathy, Ms. Dawn, are you saying something? I can't hear you. Somebody is speaking.
John,
Mr. Voros?
No, I'm not speaking.
Okay. So, so this will go out by email and everybody's good with that? That's the means of distributing. Okay. So given all that information, Mr.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
I just want to say publicly to all of you, this has been an extremely trying time, and you know, I want to thank you all for, you know, we've really worked hard, and I just want to put that on the record. You know, the letter doesn't thank all of you, but I want to say, you know, you're part of the community, we're all part of the community as well, and I just wanted to say before we vote on this that, you know, I want to recognize how hard we've all worked, or you've all worked as a board, along with me and Ron and everyone else in the administration. It's been a very difficult time, and you know, I just wanted to say that and thank you all for that.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that sentiment, because this is the beginning. I'm sure we'll have more months to deal with, but I appreciate everything that we're all in this together, and I appreciate that sentiment. Thank you. Okay, so all those in favor of the letter?
Aye. Aye.
Discussed. Aye. Okay, so that's unanimous. We will send that out as soon as possible. And that brings us to our athletic program update. And I hope we still have Matt Memley on the line. I know we've held him for this long, maybe.
I did not leave you. I'm here. I'm here.
There we go. Hello, Mr. Memley. So the board asked for an update on what's going on with athletics, and I know it's been here and there with the CIAC changing directions over the past couple of weeks. So could you give us an update on where we see sports and what's going on in athletics for our schools?
Yeah, so Michelle, so right now our teams are finishing up with what they started on July 6th. So on July 6th, we were given the green light by the CIAC to begin conditioning with our programs. Small groups, cohorts, very stringent guidelines that they sent down. So we started that on July 6th, and a lot of our programs took part in it, and it went, I must say, it went extremely, extremely well. I really do wish, honestly, that they had given us more time, because it was only an hour a day, 3 days a week. But the way that our coaches implemented it and the guidelines that were followed, it really, in my eyes, everyone being outside was probably one of the safest and best spots for our kids to be. So that conditioning went until, and it goes until Friday. And then on Saturday, we were given the go-ahead as of right now, 8:49, 8:50 p.m. on Tuesday. We are allowed on Saturday to begin our tryouts or our first practice dates. So our fall programs are going to begin on Saturday. We have, again, the majority of our programs are going to be outside, some of which our swim team and our volleyball team will be inside. But again, we're going to be following very strict guidelines that the CIAC sent forward, and the same guidelines that I talked to Dr. Rodrigue about and to Donna Colbert about back in July. The kids are only allowed 60 minutes a day, which is split up between 30 skill and 30 conditioning minutes. The kids arrive wearing their masks. If they are not doing conditioning or working out and there's any type of instruction, the masks will go on. Our coaches will be in masks as well. And the kids, will not be given there's no water coolers. The kids will be responsible for their own water. Our coaches are all equipped with their own med kits, which include different, types of PPE, including masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, wipes, things of that nature. So that will begin on Saturday. And we, as of right now, plan to move forward as best we can, I guess, with a fall sports season. So our athletic trainer, myself, our principal, Dr. Longabuco, along with our superintendent and Donna Colbert, will stay in close contact pretty much daily. We have weekly athletic director meetings in the conference, and I'm on a weekly Zoom call with the leadership from the CIAC as well. So our trainer and myself are on those meetings weekly. And just starting last week, now that we don't have everyone, but we have the majority of our kids who are gonna try out registered. We've compiled a email list. So I'm sending, I would say 2 to 3 emails a week out to parents just to keep them in the loop and let them know the protocol that we're going on, what we're doing to keep their kids safe, and just to field any questions that they have, because obviously there are a lot. So we had our coaches meeting last night, and we all obviously understand that the most important thing right now is getting school back in session, but giving some of these kids an opportunity to be with their teammates who are some of their best friends, be with their coaches, and just to get a chance to compete, and have that outlet for them is something that I think is huge. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And as hopefully it doesn't change too much, but I'm sure it will as the information changes. It's just keeping the kids and the parents, in the loop. So kind of where we're at this point.
Okay, so Mr. D'Elia, did you have a question?
Hey, Matt, thanks for sticking around.
No problem.
Can you speak to how it's going to work during the hybrid schedule? Say my son is doing cross country and he doesn't have classes, but there is a practice. Can you explain the logistics of that?
Yeah, so Dan, that in itself is probably at this moment in time the biggest hurdle that we're working to overcome. Our coaches understand completely that this probably is not going to be, we have regional schedules set up by conference. So the SWC has regional schedules set up, playing against teams and towns that are close to us. So we all understand this is, there's no championships are going to be won. We understand what this is about. So a lot of our teams are working to keep the cohorts similar to what the kids are doing in school. And some teams may only have practices for 2 days a week that those kids are in school and on the weekends. Other teams may choose to go further. So those teams individually are going to try to work with their kids to try to work out the logistics, because right now there is no great answer for those kids who do have practice. Something that the coaches and I are working on is trying to structure the time. So if the kids do not have a ride back, some of those sub-varsity and freshmen or sophomores who aren't driving will have a chance to practice, say at 4:35 or 6 o'clock for an hour or so that they have an opportunity to get driven back by a parent. Because we all understand 3:30 p.m. for kids who don't drive and parents who work it's very difficult. So that's something that we're working on and trying to do the best we can to give all these kids an opportunity.
I'd just say also that we've talked to a lot of parents who, they work a lot of this out even on a non-COVID year where, students at home or what have you, left early for a doctor's appointment, whatever. They do find their way back. I was talking to Dr. Longabuco, I think a week or two ago, and she feels confident that it can be worked out.
May I just follow up,
Yes,
Michelle?
Mr. D'Elia.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Matt or Lori, I was just wondering, I guess, basically, if my son is at home, is he going to still be able to go to practice if there's a practice scheduled that day?
Yes. Absolutely. He
So-
definitely
You mean
will be.
allowed? Is that what
Doesn't-
you mean,
he will
allowed to
definitely-
practice?
yeah, I guess that's the question.
Yes,
Yeah.
the answer is yes.
So the kids,
Absolutely.
so if the kids are on a team, and even if they're not, it's not their day to be physically in the school, they
Yep.
can still be with their teammates, which I think is important. Okay.
Yep, 100%.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Michelle?
So is that Mr. Voros speaking, and then we'll go to Ms. Zukowski? Mr. Voros?
Yes, my question, Matthew, is what's the protocol for the visiting teams with regard to safety?
Yeah, so protocol for competitions, for visiting teams, when they come in, first and foremost, the kids will come to the facilities dressed and ready to play. So there's going to be no locker rooms. There's going to be no going inside opposing schools. Show up to the field, or the court, depending on, what the facility is. The kids come out. The National Federation of High Schools came out with guidelines for each sport. And all of these are on the CIC website. So it's pretty much show up, warm up, and play. If we get to the stage of competitions, which I'm hopeful that we do, the Southwest Conference, under guidance from CIC, we're not allowing fans at our games. So parents, friends, fans will not be allowed at our games. We do not, I don't want to get off tangent, but we do have we have one camera, which is in the stadium. So all of our events will be live streamed so parents can watch. We're in the process of we're getting a second one for the gym. So in the gym, we'll be able to be viewed. And I'm working to get another camera for the pool, so our swimming will be able to be live streamed as well. So we won't have fans. Kids will not go in, and we'll follow all the protocol from CIAC in regards to competitions that we have.
Thank you.
Okay, so I see Ms. Zukowski, you had a question, and I think Mr. Dalia had a question, and am I missing somebody else that's been? Okay, so Ms. Zukowski, why don't you go ahead with your question?
So as we've seen recently with Danbury, you can have unexpected flare-ups, and you could imagine that there are teams who are playing each other prior to that flare-up being identified. Do you have any plan for testing of teams, and do you know if the teams that we will be playing against have similar plans?
Yeah, right now, the teams that we are going to be playing in our North Division are, so we have ourselves, we have Bethel, we have Brookfield, we have New Fairfield, we have New Milford, and we have Pompero. So those are our groups. Right now, we do not have testing protocol in place for teams by themselves. We have all the guidance that the CIC has given us, and we have self-monitoring checklists for each and every one of our student athletes, along with all those other teams as well. We are all using the same health screening form that any day the kids are participating in a practice or a competition, they are to take those self-screening forms and hand those in to the coaches. But in terms of individual testing for teams, we don't have individual testing for our teams, nor do the other schools that are in our conference or our small divisions as well.
Follow up, please.
Yes, Ms. Zukowski?
So what I've been reading, and I don't know if this is a number that's how much a subject to change it is, but 40% of cases are expected to be asymptomatic. And the younger you are, the more likely you are one of the ones who is asymptomatic. I'm just concerned that this could give an exposure to having COVID come in and ending up shutting our schools down. So my preference would be to have, at least investigate some level of testing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just consult with Donna and with Dr. Rodrigue and to, see what their thoughts and opinions would be on that. Our first date for interscholastic competition would be till September 24th. Everything up until that point would just be within Newtown, and it would just be basic drill work, skill work, and practices. But yeah, I mean, I can't really disagree with that statement. I think speaking with Dr. Rodriguez and Donna would be something I would do to see what we could come up with.
Yeah, well, I think there are two issues there. It's not just our students out there, so that's number one. And number two is some of what you mentioned, and you're right on, Mrs. Zukowski. A lot of the asymptomatic students are much younger. So again, these are high school students. But I do agree that if there is a protocol, certainly the CIAC will have to look at that in a broader sense, and we'll be talking with our director of health as well if we want to put in any kind of protocol beyond what's being asked of all schools. We just have to consider that.
Okay. Mr. D'Elia, did you have a question? No. Okay. Were there other questions? I have a question. So the cohort D are the students who are opting to do the distance learning throughout the entire week. Are they also eligible to play on the athletic teams?
Those students that are opting to do distance learning, yeah, they will still be eligible to participate in athletics. Yep.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? No. All right. So, oh, I know. I have one question about the transportation piece. Does the CIAC have guidelines on how the transportation should take place, or what do we have? What are we planning for transport to games and events?
Yeah, the CIC has kind of left that up to the districts and the individual bus companies. Our goal for our events would be to utilize the transportation as we did and try to social distance as best as we can and use all those guidelines in place. We're working to create, and we have a pretty good sub-varsity schedule set up, so all those games would be on Saturdays. But for the weekday games for varsity teams, the same type of transportation that we have used, utilizing our buses, trying to keep the distance as short as possible. And that was a thought between splitting our conference in half and trying to do things as logistically close as possible. But that would, again, be something that we would have to speak with Alan about and Dr. Rodriguez about to set up our transportation as best we can using the buses that we have. So that would probably be the best answer I could give you at this point.
Matt, can you also talk about football and volleyball?
Yeah, football and volleyball, the ever-changing two sports that right now I just don't have a great answer. I really don't. We're following the protocol as best that we can. Football is obviously the biggest and the hardest one to really get a grasp on. It's ever-changing. So that's one that we really have daily, every other day communication from CIC on football and how much it's changing. It's hard for me to even speculate about that. From a volleyball standpoint, we've been asked, CIC has sent out surveys asking us if we are able or willing to host volleyball games outside to try to do a lot of the skill work outside as best as we can, which we are able to. We are lucky we have ample space to do that. So those are two, if you will call them wild cards, that it's hard for me to even predict where those are going to go.
Okay, Mr. D'Elia.
Hey, Matt, to the coaches, or do you have a plan if sports are canceled for the coaches to do something with the kids to kind of keep that camaraderie, or, is there?
Yeah, we do. So we'll say this is what I told my coaches last night, and they're all in agreement. Plan A is if everything stays the way it is and we're able to continue in school, we continue with the interscholastic schedule and we compete against other schools. Plan B, we would keep it to an in-house Newtown High School intramural program where the kids practice and they compete against themselves. Plan C, we go to a distance coaching, virtual coaching model, which we implemented in the spring, which would be the last case resort. But it would, again, give the chance for these kids to work with their coaches 2 to 3 days a week on Google Classroom and video conferencing, and then to be able to work out on their own, like our spring student athletes did last March into last May. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yes, Mr. Delia, do you have?
Last question, I promise. A lot of these seniors were looking to play sports in college, and I'm just wondering if you have any insights into what's happening with the kids that are trying to become collegiate football players or volleyball players or swimmers when, yeah. Is there anything said about that at all?
That's the hardest pill to swallow right there, is that a lot of those kids who aren't, some of these kids have played varsity for a few years and they've been able to come up with it and get their own highlight videos out to different colleges. But for kids who haven't had a chance to, that's the hardest thing. And so right now it's trying to hold out that hope to have some type of a season. And then if not, you hope that at some point, whether it's live or whether it's from just sending videos out, that the coaches would have a chance to see them. But a lot of our kids from last year in the spring going this year to the fall that are seniors missing out on the season, there's no easy answer for that. And then that's been one of the hardest things, especially in my role as an AD, because I see all the sports. It's hard, and it really ends up being sad. And that's why we're hoping that we have some type of an experience, so these kids will be able to put some type of package together to send out to schools that may have been interested in them.
The universities and colleges are in the same boat, really. So, they're being extremely understanding and fair-minded and reasonable on their end now as well.
Very true.
Can I just return to the transportation piece again and just ask if we have, I know we're limited on the number of buses we have for these events. So is that we have to be able to fit the teams onto the limited number of buses that we have for after school events? Is that an issue?
Well, I think that's changed because we've, the issue was field trips at the time, and there was a lot going on in the district, across the district, and the number of buses that we could utilize. But, we're going to have less of that now across the district, so that will open up some opportunities more than we had before.
Okay, that's really good to know, especially if we can allocate more buses. I'm imagining the football team on the bus, and I would love to see more buses allocated for those.
Again, that's going to come down to, we haven't even really broached that yet. And I'm sure Matt knows that. We'll talk to All-Star, and when all is said and done, see if I'm anticipating more buses than we've had just because of the nature of the circumstances now. But again, we won't know that. And I know what you're thinking, Dr. Koo, and that's to get less students on buses. Certainly that would be the goal.
Yeah. Mr. Cruson?
I know that there are drivers who will be missing out on that extra work since we don't have the field trips. So I would hope that would open up more potential for when we do have a use for the buses, that there may be more drivers available for what work is available. So,
yeah. Okay. So I don't know if that's built into our current expenses for COVID, but there's just one more thing to consider if we haven't built that in yet. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Memoli, for staying with us so late. I appreciate. Oh, I'm seeing. Is Mr. Burrows? Do you have a question?
No.
Thanks,
Okay.
Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez, to all the board members that you all are doing well. It's appreciated. We appreciate it a lot. Thank you, guys.
Good first day tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great first day. Have a nice night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
All right. So that'll bring us to our public participation.
I need to make a
Oh,
motion
thank
for the
you. I even
minutes.
have it written here, and I'm I'm so glad you guys are here to keep me on track. So I'll entertain a motion on the minutes.
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of 8/6/20.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes a motion, Mr. Kusan seconds, and then I will leave it to Ms. Zukowski. You asked for these to be removed, and I believe I sent the proposed language change around. So I don't know, do you want to speak to it? Does anybody have any questions on the proposed change to the minutes?
So for the record, I'll read the proposed change so that people can follow it too. In the minutes, it says, Ms. Zukowski asked if we will meet the CDC social distancing requirement if we allow 50% of the students to be 3 feet apart when wearing a mask. I am asking that be replaced. The discussion on that meeting happened at 46 minutes and 46 minutes and 30 seconds or so. And what was actually asked was Ms. Zukowski asked if moving to the hybrid learning model would allow all or most of our students to be spaced according to the full 6-foot CDC social distancing guidelines. And if so, she noted that the use of masks would further enhance student safety.
So that's the proposed change to the minutes.
Yes.
Does anybody have any comments or objections to making that change to the minutes? All right, I'm sensing that nobody has any objections to that change, so we'll incorporate that change to the minutes. Speak now or hold your peace. Mr. Voros, are you speaking?
No, I'm voting.
Okay, so all those in favor of the minutes as proposed with the amendment? Aye.
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 Any opposed? That's unanimous? Are you voting? Oh, I see. Okay, so, and Ms. Herman states is abstaining. So it's 6 in favor. Is that right? All right, so 6 in favor and Ms. Herman states abstaining. So actually, I guess it's good that we removed those from the consent agenda anyway. Okay, so that motion passes, and that brings us to public participation. And so now we'll open the meeting to public participation with the same guidelines in effect as for the first public participation, except that you may now address board topics that you might want us to consider in the future. And if you'd like to speak, if you could unmute yourself with the *6 feature on your phone, we would be happy to hear from you. But I'm not seeing anybody. And so we will close out public participation. And I thank you all for hanging in there through all the technical difficulties. And thank Ron Binkowski for your last meeting with us. And we'll sign off. Oh, we'll take a motion. We'll do it officially.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. D'Elia makes a motion. Mr. Kusan seconds. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
All right. So we are adjourned.